go. And we are rolling on November 26th, where it's a beautiful day in Los Angeles at UCLA. The sunshine is shining, and we're doing a debate on the very important question that the United States, the proposition is the United States should legalize marijuana. Speaking, these fives were assigned randomly. The students don't believe a word they're saying, so don't take this out of context 20 years from now when Miriam's running for president. These were assigned randomly. They're just doing an intellectual exercise. So let's remember that, right, Henry, right? Miriam? Wonder what my old fiance thought.
I can't believe that.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know she was in there.
Yeah. They always come back.
But no, I can't. I'm very happily married. Very happily married. Okay. Yeah, all right. So let's let the debate begin, and we'll first hear from the leader of the government, who will give his case for why we should legalize marijuana. And let me get you in focus a little better. Okay. You're in perfect focus. All right, let us begin, sir. And you're timing yourself, so let us begin.
All right. The topic resolved in this brief is that the United States should motion to legalize marijuana across the 50 states. So what's the problem? The problem that comes from condemning marijuana in America is three-pronged. The first has to do with public health. People overlook the health benefits of marijuana because of its long history of condemnation. Marijuana is a far less dangerous and addictive drug than alcohol or tobacco, which are sold at will on every corner of the United States. It has various health benefits. It can relieve many symptoms that affect a multitude of Americans every day. Take cancer treatment, for example. Cannabis can slow down the growth and kill certain types of cancer, and is also effective against nausea and vomiting that's induced by chemotherapy. Short-term use of oral cannabinoids may also improve symptoms of spasticity among people with multiple sclerosis. The second problem is the crime and violence both within the U.S. and at the border due to the illegal sale of marijuana. Legalization would logically end the need for such criminal behavior, and moreover, very high incarceration rates have resulted from this conflict with racially charged roots. This sub-issue of racism goes hand in hand with the legalization of marijuana. In fact, the Drug Policy Alliance stated that in 2018, the percentage of people arrested for drug law violations who are Black or Latino is up to 46.9%, despite those people making up just 31% of the U.S. population. Finally, the United States misses out on valuable economic benefits of marijuana through not legalizing it nationwide. How big is the problem? Economically, if marijuana was legalized and regulated, an estimated $8 billion would be saved annually in government spending on drug enforcement at the border. According to the Colorado Department of Revenue, marijuana is one of America's top-selling agricultural products, and the combined 4-year sales of marijuana for the state has now topped $4.5 billion. In terms of crime, over 663,000 Americans were arrested for possession of marijuana last year, according to the Drug Policy Alliance. Because of this, over 200,000 students have lost federal financial aid, and worse than that, over 200,000 lives have been lost on the Mexican border. Health-wise, while marijuana can be detrimental with excessive use, it actually has many overlooked health benefits. Last year, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine assessed more than 10,000 scientific studies on the medical benefits of marijuana, and they found that marijuana could be used to treat chronic pain, which is a leading cause of disability in America that affects more than 25 million adults. So why do we have this problem? Marijuana convictions can have lifelong consequences for employment, education, immigration status, and family life. People continue to suffer penalties of convictions for marijuana-related acts, even if the state no longer considers these acts a crime. Incarceration reduces the rate of wage growth by about 30% over the course of a person's lifetime and makes it way harder for them to get jobs in the first place. Secondly, the war on drugs has taken a huge toll on American lives. The war on drugs began with Nixon in 1971 through the increase of federal funding for drug agencies and treatment efforts, and every year since then, incarceration rates in the U.S. have increased despite decreasing crime rates. According to drugpolicy.org, the number of people arrested for a marijuana law violation in 2018 was 663,367, and the number of those people charged with possession was 608,000. This, of course, also affects the American economy, as there are hundreds of people who could be working throughout the time they are incarcerated. Finally, people in America suffer health-wise when there are viable treatments to their ailments using marijuana that are foolishly outlawed by the American government. It was treated as having limited or no therapeutic use and being a dangerous drug like heroin requiring the strictest controls. What is the solution? In terms of crime, we can begin by cutting the racial disparity using laws and acts like the one proposed by the City of Oakland. The City of Oakland tried to correct the incarceration issue by coming up with an affirmative action licensing, which would require half of medical marijuana licenses to go to people with a cannabis-related conviction and fall below a certain income threshold. This act has drawn support from leading politicians like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Another interesting proposal is the federal legalization bill proposed by Cory Booker, which establishes funds to reinvest in the communities most impacted by the failed war on drugs by creating job training programs, reentry services, and community centers. In terms of health, we have made advancements in the medical marijuana field since it was first legalized, one of the better ones being the extraction and use of CBD. While we do not have concrete proof either way that marijuana is completely beneficial or detrimental, doctors like Peter Grinspoon of Harvard support its use as patients have increasingly begun embracing it. We must continue researching its effects, but as patients continue to use it, we must at least attempt to control it, and with legalization, we can much more readily do so. Finally, economically, the solution lies in job creation. More dispensaries and marijuana nurseries means more jobs for Americans, which is a huge step in the right direction economically and could incentivize those illegally involved in marijuana to turn their lives around.
Hold your period, you're blocking your face.
A RCG Economics and Marijuana Policy Group study done this year on Nevada says that legalizing recreational marijuana in the state could support over 41,000 jobs till 2024 and generate over $1.7 billion in labor income. So will the solution work? According to a 2018 Guardian article, the study suggests that the full legalization of marijuana in Colorado and Washington will have an even stronger impact on the drug trade as large-scale marijuana production facilities are erected in these states, further threatening the position of drug cartels. Take Canada as a second example, which was the first major world economy to legalize marijuana in 2018. The main reason it was legalized was because Prime Minister Trudeau believed that it would drive out illegal sellers of marijuana and actually have the opposite effect and protect young kids. It has had this effect, as in a Boston Globe article, a Canadian man was quoted saying that now they could go buy marijuana without being scared that the police were going to get them. Canadian arrests of minorities have severely decreased in the year that marijuana has been legalized. So what are the advantages to my proposal? By passing the laws proposed in Section 5, we would not only create jobs for minorities and ex-criminals, we would help them work their way back into society. A study done and published on prisonpolicy.org in 2019 asserts that the unemployment rate for formerly incarcerated people is nearly 5 times higher than that of the general population. This idea of affirmative action licensing would eliminate a significant portion of this unemployment rate and would definitely help reintegrate these people back into society in a healthy and legal way. Marijuana is a good alternative for patients that do not like using traditional over-the-counter medications, and while I acknowledge that the point goes deeper than this, it is still a fair argument. According to a 2019 article on verywellhealth.com, marijuana is safer than some other medications prescribed to treat the same symptoms. For example, it may be used instead of opioids for pain management, which are highly addictive and typically not recommended for use in treating chronic pain. Jobs created by legalizing marijuana is great for our economy and the overall well-being of Americans. There would be ample opportunities for secondary industries which would relate it to legal cannabis, although not directly involved in its production. According to Investopedia, these might include software developing, financing services, construction companies, and more. Legal marijuana presents the possibility of tremendous benefits to economies on a local and national scale. Finally, there are other substances that are legal and available in gas stations.
Say on balance, which
On balance, there are other substances that are legal and available in gas stations in all 50 states that are proven to be far more dangerous than marijuana. Though there are still some effects of marijuana that remain a mystery, its benefits are clear and enjoyed by many Americans. The economic, social, and public health benefits that come from legalizing marijuana are far greater than the negative effects that are presented. We have the opportunity to add a very big player into the nation's economy and regulate it so that there is equal opportunity for everybody to enjoy its benefits while creating numerous amounts of jobs. I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Excellent, thank you. Very good. Okay, okay. You have the timer going? Okay, I'll stand a little closer. Let me pull back the camera a little bit. Yeah. Okay, let me put it in a little bit. Okay, very good. Okay, remember you look at me and nod at each other, and let's do a CUR-SX, okay? Alright.
So you mentioned that there are many health benefits to marijuana, and I'm not disputing that. But if someone needs marijuana for cancer, for nausea, whatever else you gave, for different diseases, if they need it for health benefits, why can't they go and get a prescription from a doctor?
So they can go and get a prescription from a doctor, and obviously that's what they've been doing for so long. But the point of this is many people don't want to rely on those medicines anymore. People are searching for alternate solutions, and marijuana has been one in the past for years.
So they can get marijuana. It's called Marinol. It's been available since 1985. It's in prescription form. Every pharmacy has it. Every local pharmacy has it.
This stuff is stronger and it works better, and now they have things like CBD that don't necessarily get you high but are different than that Marinol
So that's
stuff
what
that's
Marinol.
sold.
Marinol does not have the THC, it just has the CBD to help with the nausea, to help with the pain. That's what
Additionally,
Marinol
though, the
does.
THC does add another factor that is beneficial. It
Okay.
stimulates the mind more, and also the effects are more concentrated and they're stronger, and people don't want to rely on these opioids and these painkillers that they can get even more addicted to than they would marijuana.
Okay, so if we make marijuana legal, then why don't we just make everything legal? Let's make pain pills legal. Marijuana is a drug. Pain pills are drugs. Let's make everything legal. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we just make marijuana legal?
Because pain pills are highly addictive and
So
highly
is
destructive,
marijuana.
but that's not proven. It's
It
not
is
proven that it's
The long-term
addictive.
effects of marijuana include hallucinations, and a New Zealand study found that people lost 8 IQ points over the course of their life smoking marijuana.
Losing a couple of IQ points
a
is
couple,
different.
8 is more than a couple.
Well, losing 8 IQ points is still better than being addicted to opioid painkillers and never seeing the light of day again, overdosing on pain pills, being addicted, relying on those pain
Yeah,
pills
so
for
many
years to
people
come.
are addicted to marijuana. It's a big problem.
It hasn't really been proven that you can get addicted per se. It's obviously people
So when
call
you have to use it every day, that's not an addiction?
You don't have to use it every day. There's
Well,
no
some people have become addicted. So let's move on to something else. So you mentioned in your brief that if we make marijuana legal, then we would save $8 billion on annual border security. So are you saying, and that would get rid of the black market. So are you saying that once drug cartels can no longer illegally sell marijuana here, they will just go away and become doctors or dentists or go to some legal trade? Won't they just move on to more hardcore stuff like heroin, cocaine, meth?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I acknowledge that just because we outlaw something or legalize something, it doesn't just go away overnight. The point is you can take that money, stop defending the border as harshly, use it on programs like education
So are you
programs.
implying that we should build a wall?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying that it would help a lot if we didn't have to get the marijuana from these illegal cartels. We could get it from dispensaries. We could get it from other places. There would be a lot of things that we could avoid
Okay.
this time.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Yes, okay. That was Miriam's process. Okay.
Any questions?
Okay, the chair will now recognize the leader of the opposition for her constructive or counter argument to the affirmative case. Okay, let me get you, let me see if I can get you in the picture a little better. How do I do this? I don't know. Let's see. Without ruining the camera. No, I have to go there you go. Hope it doesn't fall off. Okay. I just won't touch it. Casper won't jiggle or do anything. All right, go ahead, please. Leader of the opposition, let me hear your argumentation, please.
Marijuana is the most commonly abused drug in the U.S. and around the world. Those who support its legalization for medical or for general use fail to recognize the greater costs of legalizing this harmful substance. Marijuana is a hazardous drug as it is a gateway drug and is not economically beneficial and increases DUIs, so therefore it should be banned in the U.S. So what is the problem? Well, legalizing marijuana has many problems. Firstly, marijuana is known as a gateway drug in which young teens and young adults get addicted to this harmful substance and move on to more dangerous substances like cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. This drug is the most commonly used illicit drug in the United States and is used by more than 11 million young adults between the ages of 18 and 25, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse in 2019. The vast majority of heroin users have used marijuana long before they even tried heroin. Marijuana also has many short-term and long-term negative effects on the brain. Young adults whose brains are still developing are especially negatively affected by the harmful effects of this drug. When people begin using marijuana as teenagers, the drug may impair their thinking, memory, and learning functions, and affect how the brain builds connections between these areas necessary for these functions. A study from New Zealand conducted by researchers at Duke University in 2016 found that people who started smoking marijuana heavily in their teens and continued to smoke into their young adult lives lost an average of 8 IQ points between the ages of 13 and 38. Of those studied, the lost mental abilities didn't return in those who quit marijuana as adults. What's most frightening and extremely problematic is that researchers do not know the full long-term effects of this drug. How can we legalize something, especially something as dangerous and harmful as marijuana, when we don't know the long-term effects it has on the population? States that have legalized marijuana have seen a high spike in driving under the influence, which is not only detrimental to the driver, but is also detrimental to society as a whole. Detection of marijuana in drivers involved in traffic crashes has become increasingly common. According to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which conducted a study in 2018, 14% of weekend nighttime drivers tested positive for THC, compared to 8.6% in 2007 when it was still illegal. Additionally, tracking marijuana impaired driving is often really difficult, as drivers who are caught under the influence are often only cited with a high blood alcohol level as opposed to being tested for marijuana. Therefore, there may be a lot more driving under the influence of marijuana than have been reported. Additionally, marijuana has not produced the economical benefits that were expected after legalizing this substance. I will use Colorado as an example. In fact, more harm than good came as a result of this legalization. Politicians promised a slew of benefits to public schools prior to legalizing marijuana in Colorado. They promised that schools would receive substantive funds as a result of this business. However, these were all empty promises. According to an article by the Denver Post in 2018, no amount of marijuana taxes changed Colorado's per pupil funding ranking because virtually no marijuana went into the school funding. The only benefit to Colorado's schools was the construction of one measly middle school in Montrose County, which obviously didn't make much of a difference in the public education in Colorado. Essentially, politicians lied and manipulated voters into thinking that Amendment 64 would improve public school funding, but in reality it has caused an epidemic in the once gorgeous state of Colorado. The legalization of marijuana in some states has also created a secondhand smoke issue in states that have legalized this dangerous substance. According to the CDC, secondhand smoke from combusted marijuana contains fine particulate matter that can be breathed deeply in the lungs, which can cause lung irritation, asthma attacks, and make respiratory issues more likely. The marijuana odor has also sparked friction across many cities, and when once society was able to breathe in fresh air, our noses are now inundated with the stench of marijuana. This creates unnecessary air pollution. Just walk into any frat or dorm and you'll be hit with this noxious odor. There are clearly many downsides to legalizing marijuana, mainly stemming from the fact that marijuana is a dangerous drug and should not be out on our streets. The solution to this problem requires a carefully calibrated approach that aims to critically assess the role of marijuana in society, along with its risks and benefits. Firstly, states that have legalized marijuana for medicinal and recreational use should subsequently ban this drug and reclassify it into the controlled substance category. Once it's been reclassified, authorities should incarcerate any users and distributors of marijuana and prosecute these individuals to the fullest extent. Also, adjustments to federal legislation to permit the research and study of marijuana to understand its far-reaching effects, medicinal or otherwise, need to be conducted. Unfortunately, now that 11 states have legalized marijuana for recreational use, there is now a need to solve this growing epidemic of young adults getting addicted to this substance. To solve this new and preventable problem, we must ensure that at-risk youth are aware of the harmful effects of marijuana. The advantages to my proposal include the fact that marijuana will lead to this drug not being used as a gateway to more harmful drugs like heroin and cocaine. Banning the legalization of marijuana will lead to streets that are cleaner with less secondhand smoke and less air pollution. Additionally, Banning the legalization of marijuana will also lead to less young adults accessing this drug and placing it in vape devices, which has resulted in numerous deaths across the country. The CDC stated that vaping THC, the chemical compound in marijuana, is tied to hundreds of lung illnesses and at least 12 deaths across the nation. Banning marijuana will prevent vape device companies from selling marijuana-based products for their devices, ultimately removing marijuana-caused vape-related lung illnesses. The advantages of banning the legalization of marijuana far outweigh the disadvantages. Marijuana is a gateway drug, is not economically beneficial, leads to increase of DUIs, and is linked to long-term serious consequences in young adults. And to top it off, it stinks. If this isn't grounds for banning the legalization of this dangerous substance, then I don't know what is. Save the drama and say no to marijuana.
Thank you. I now stand open.
I now stand open for cross-examination and points of clarification.
Thank you so much. Here. The chair will now hear a cross-examination from the leader of the government. And just give me a moment to fill out the respective cabinet plan. Page, yes. Okay, and we're going to do the cross-ex for Henry. All right, Henry, let's see. You rip apart her code. Oh, you're taller than she is. Just
A little bit, yeah.
Just a
Okay,
little.
move, okay, just wait. I don't want to move that way. You all move that way. Okay, perfect there. Okay, just a minute. Now, let me just. There you go. Okay, very nice. Okay, go ahead and start. Henry?
Okay. So I acknowledge that there is a possible link between marijuana and other harder drugs, but what evidence do you actually have to prove that marijuana causes people to then try harder drugs, as you have stated in your speech?
So according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, they did a study in 2019, and they found that the vast majority of heroin users used marijuana long before they even tried heroin. So they were using that drug as kind of like a stepping point into getting into the more hardcore stuff.
I've
This is
taken a lot
proven
of science
science.
classes at this school, though, and one thing I always learn on repeat is that correlation does not imply causation. And just because these people have tried marijuana 20 years ago and now they're doing heroin does not imply whatsoever that the marijuana caused them to do the heroin. So I need to know.
Yes, so that's correct. Correlation does not always equal causation, but in this case, they found that people who were using marijuana, not just one time or 2 times or 3 times, they were using it, for a couple years before, and then they went on to something more hardcore. They dropped marijuana, found heroin, found cocaine, and started using that. I mean, it produced a better high, and they started using that instead of marijuana.
That's fine, and we'll move on, but I just genuinely think that we can't really say what that marijuana causes.
Well, I didn't say it. The study said it.
All right. Either way, we'll move on. So you've also stressed that cannabis can be detrimental to young adults, but what about the rest of the population that is above the developmental age that could benefit from marijuana, both recreationally and medically?
Yeah, so the ages that they were studying was age 13 through age 38. So it was, it's like the young adult age and mid ages.
What about 50-year-olds with chronic pain that
with
will lead
chronic
to
pain,
arthritis
yes, so
and
they can
all that
go
stuff?
to their doctors and get the prescription form, which is known as Marinol, and that is the same thing. They can get it legally
They want stronger stuff.
regulated.
They want stronger stuff.
They can get a higher dose.
All right. Moving on. Do you really think that we need to incarcerate more people than we already do in this country? As you know, our incarceration rate is already disgustingly high and only increasing. Why would you want to add to that rather than give people a second chance in life?
So if you commit a crime, you should do the time. They broke the law. They should go to prison. Whether it's,
Why
a
should
lot
we
of drug
change the law, though, so that more people are getting imprisoned when it's already legal in places and you're saying we should ban it and then prosecute those people to the fullest extent?
Yeah, so prosecute them if they break the law. If they break the law, they should do the time.
But if you're
And that's
changing the
unfair.
law, then how can you prosecute them now when it was legal before and now
No, it's once the law is changed, then if they break that new changed law, then they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. They broke the law.
All right. And what about the odor? People smoke cigarettes in public all the time and nobody seems to care about the odor of cigarettes. Why all of a sudden is odor an issue with smoking?
Well, there's no smoke zones everywhere now, all across the city, but that doesn't really apply to marijuana. You smell it everywhere. I mean, just walk down Frat Row and there's people smoking everywhere. You smell it. I mean, it's there. People don't abide by it. And if you think about it, marijuana has kind of taken over the tobacco industry. More people are now trying marijuana than they are trying tobacco.
Fair enough. We're out of time, too.
Oh.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, where's your cross the clock? Okay, excellent. All right, very nice. Okay, it's now time for the 4 steps of refutation. Sorry. She's just 3. She said, I disagree because therefore, in case you forgot. Repeat it. Thank you so much. Okay, Henry, oh, wait a minute. You go over that way just a little bit, please. And then let me just refocus the camera. Okay, stand up straight.
Okay.
Your head's no longer cut off. Okay, very good.
All right.
Okay, Henry, begin, please.
Okay. My opponent's main argument throughout the brief is that marijuana is a so-called gateway drug, a claim that has been argued for years. According to NBC News, gateway drug is a nasty term that has been used since the 1970s to demonize hippies as well as people of color, suggesting that it was being foisted on children who would soon find themselves irresistibly attracted to heroin or later cocaine or meth. Later, she continues to argue that claim, saying that people who are addicted to marijuana are 3 times more likely to be addicted to heroin. In fact, there is absolutely no clinical evidence that demonstrably proves marijuana is a gateway to anything other than maybe a very expensive pizza delivery bill and a burn hole in your pants. Furthermore, throughout the brief, my opponent gives causal evidence that has absolutely no research backing. There is no hard evidence to say that smoking marijuana has caused people to then switch to opioids, and assuming causation is incorrect in this case. This is part of the reason that marijuana has been outlawed for so long. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, which refuse to acknowledge any new research on marijuana and stubbornly insist on keeping it classified as a Schedule I substance, even say that the majority of people who use marijuana do not go on to use other harder substances. Therefore, the claim that marijuana is a gateway drug and should not be legalized is weak and not backed up by any hard evidence. Secondly, my opponent stated that marijuana has not produced the economic benefits that were expected after legalizing in states like Colorado, and that more harm than good came as a result of this legalization. This is not the case. As I previously stated, according to the Colorado Department of Revenue, the combined 4-year sales of marijuana has now topped $4.5 billion. Additionally, it has been researched by the Drug Policy Alliance that we could be saving an annual $8 billion, which I'm sure the government would be happy to spend on schools and education rather than border control. Therefore, if we were to legalize marijuana as a country, we would be able to reallocate many of the funds used to keep marijuana off the streets and imprison our people into education on how to properly use marijuana and allow Americans to actually reap its benefits. Finally, my opponent asserts that states that have legalized marijuana have seen a multitude of unforeseen and undesirable effects, such as increased burglaries, influxes of criminals into the street, and increased sale to minors. While this might be true in some cases, as of course no laws are perfect, this is certainly not the case overall. In a 2018 Guardian article, they state that the crimes most strongly affected by the legalization of marijuana in Colorado and Washington were robbery, which fell by 19%, and murder, which also fell by 10%. Homicide specifically related to the drug trade fell by an astonishing 41% as well. So not only do the crime rates drop, but this influx of criminals is actually the complete opposite of what is happening in places with legalized marijuana. Therefore, it isn't that legalizing marijuana leads to influxes of criminals, sales to minors, or increased crime. All legalizing marijuana actually does is give people who have been wrongfully imprisoned for ridiculous amounts of time a second chance to get themselves back on track, and allows people to properly reap the benefits of marijuana. And I'm out of time.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, where's your refutation box? Just a minute. Okay, very nice. Okay, and I need to hear from the negative, the 4 steps of a refutation. And I will have to move the video, so I don't want to make it fall. Okay. All right. Miriam, let's begin.
So my opponent is using evidence from NBC News and the Guardian article, and I have to say, those are really not credible sources. So when you talk about my studies correlation does not equal causation. When you refute those, you should probably use better sources. My studies come from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and this was a study done in 2019. This is a very reputable source, as well as WebMD, also a very reputable source. So moving on. My opponent states that there are many medicinal purposes to marijuana, particularly in managing pain in patients. I am not disagreeing with the medical benefits, as individuals who truly need marijuana for medicinal purposes can go to their doctors and get a prescription for marijuana. The reality is that the prescription drug, known as Marinol, has been around since 1985, before both of us have even been born. Therefore, if patients really need the drug, they can do it the legal way, by going to a doctor. This is a very regulated and safe way to get medical treatment. In fact, it's the safest way that you know that you are getting the real drug, as black market marijuana trade is unregulated and therefore unsafe. If a patient needs marijuana for pain relief, they do have many options available to them, which do not require the legalization of marijuana. My opponent also states that legalizing marijuana will lead to a decrease in border patrol necessary on the Mexican border, as drug cartels will leave the marijuana trade. I disagree with the statement, as the black market will never be removed, as these drug cartels will never join a legal workforce. Drug cartels will just move on from marijuana to heroin or meth or cocaine, which is just as bad. In fact, my opponent is implying that legalizing marijuana will solve all our U.S.-Mexican border patrol issues, and essentially proposing to build a wall instead of having border patrol on the border. It is obvious that drug cartels will join another illegal trade, so therefore, legalizing marijuana will not remove the black market. My opponent also stated that we have 663,000 marijuana law violations since 2018. And I disagree that this is even an issue, as people who are breaking the law deserve to do the time. It goes back to the old saying that if you commit a crime, you should do the time. Therefore, legalizing marijuana is only encouraging more people to develop poor and dangerous habits and does not positively benefit society as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, you may cross the house and shake hands and congratulate each other on a very fine debate. Well, this was a really excellent debate. I would really, if you guys could send me your briefs so I could put them up, as models, because this was a really good debate, and I would appreciate it. I really appreciate the clash. This wasn't two ships in the night. You isolated, Henry, the major positive points that people state for marijuana. You didn't leave anything out, and I thought you hit them all well with good evidence, with a couple of exceptions, which Miriam pointed out. Miriam, you were on point with the counter information. What got kind of muddled was this causality question. Correlation does not equal causation, and this has always been a really tricky issue when we've debated marijuana, and judges really kind of throw up their hands because it gets real muddled. And when it gets muddled, judges give the presumption to the fact that maybe is, because they just are not sure. Henry, I thought maybe you just didn't know about it until you exchanged briefs, and I don't know how soon you got it, but Miriam was relying heavily on this Marinol.
I didn't know about it.
Yeah, and let me tell you something, there's some great evidence that it's not very good.
Yeah, I should have hit that.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I was surprised you weren't on top of that, because
I just missed
that would have
that.
taken out a lot of her solvency of her counter plans. Yeah. Miriam, you are just so damn smart. It just tells me that you haven't done this before. It's I love the way you did your counter plan. That was really smart and good because you, instead of just being opposed to legalization, you gave the audience and the judge a fairly reasonable counter option. And you did clarify, he tried to confuse it, but you did clarify that we're not going to go home to home to get the old people and rearrest them, but if they screw up now, they will be arrested. And so I thought that was really good. Come on, secondhand smoke. Your answers, can I be honest with you? We're lame, okay? Come on. Yeah, no, come on. It's really bad. Secondhand smoke is a very serious problem. And there are people, I'm not as bad as I used to be, but there are people that are really militant about smoke in their air, you know, and they just, you're smoking a cigarette, get away from me. You often see people say, get that cigarette. And I've seen people on campus say, did you know this is a non-smoking campus?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jesus.
Christ,
Yeah.
You really want to do that.
Yeah.
You know, but, yeah, Miriam was right. You walk along Fraternity Row and, you know, they're just out there on the sidewalk and it waffles out from the houses and stuff. And then finally, the cross-exes were very good. They were focused on issues very nicely. You guys are both really smart. You focused on the issues that you needed to get at. I took a few points off your cross-ex, Miriam, because you let him go on a little bit too much, and you needed to cut him off. He got more information out on his position than you should have allowed. The refutation was on point, and you have learned just as I wanted you to know how to do refutation. It was very clear. Just you picked the 4 correct issues to refute. And you went after them. So you knew you couldn't do everything, but you chose very wisely. So I just have no complaints about anything. Let me just see. I started a couple of things. Let me see if what's our time like? Are we out of time?
It's 10:57.
10:57. Do I have another debate at 11? Did I schedule another debate now?
I don't think so. Henry, is there another debate after this? The other boys?
No.
Today? I don't think so. I think they had to switch because one of them was going home. So I think they're going week 10.
They're going week 10. Okay, good. I need to put that in my calendar. And who are the 2 that are going week 10?
I think it's Leo and Doug.
Leo and Doug. Okay.
And also me and what's my partner's name?
Tom?
Me and Tom.
Are going week 10.
Yeah.
In the classroom.
Me and Tom are scheduled to be in the class.
The other 2 are
going to
go at a
are
different
not
time.
scheduled at the
Okay,
class.
so I need to schedule Leo and Doug like in here or something, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just see real quick. Oh yeah, I wanna criticize you a minute, Henry. Okay, because I appreciate you letting me be honest, because most people don't want to hear real honest. I don't think you really understood the inherency issue of why do we have the problem. I don't think you got at the crux of the matter.
That one was definitely the hardest one for me to write because it's like why do we have the problem? And it's like it was just like the problem is like it's unclear like what the problem is because it's like it's just legalizing marijuana and like the problem is like we're
Right.
But yes, I can see how that was a little weak.
Yeah, and I wish you had noticed it and attacked that very strongly, saying, hey,
Yeah.
Henry, hasn't told us why we have the problem. And we have a quote problem because people don't want to follow the law, and we have the problem because it's a schedule, because some very paranoid people made it a Schedule 4 drug, and it stayed that way, and it's been, people have been indoctrinated to believe that that is dangerous and bad, and it's a belief thing. But when you say it hurts people's unemployment, that's not why we have the problem. War on drugs, why do we have a problem? War on drugs, we took a war on drugs because people had a belief that drugs are dangerous and evil now. So we wanted to get a little closer to why they have that belief. That's all I'm saying, okay? So, you see what I mean? The causal stuff is really tricky to argue. The city of Oakland, my lord, affirmative action licensing. I had to giggle. I'm sorry, but
About Alexandria.
Alexandria, AOC. Well,
She wants to
maybe
Yeah,
I apologize if I offended you by
No,
giggling.
That's okay.
And,
I giggled too.
And Cory Booker is about second on my credibility list as a horse's A.
Yeah.
And, so I thought, my lord, my friend, if this is the best you can come up with for your solvency, you're in trouble. But you are, I'm being too harsh on you. You're on the right track. You understood how you find solvency by finding many programs that worked and say, we could expand Oakland
Yeah, exactly.
statewide or nationwide.
Right, it wasn't necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Expanding on their ideas that were not
Right.
so terrible. I
They're terrible. Okay. For the layman, you need to watch out for using phrases like CBD. We don't want CBD. We just want-" And the layout's going CBD, right? So you need to be careful about that. And okay. Miriam, you needed to say this issue of it's gonna. You were a little bit like two ships in the night about how it generates a lot of money. Where the hell does it go? Sure doesn't get to the schools. That's for damn sure. But and then all you did was repeat another piece of evidence that generated a boatload of money. But and it built one school. Whoopee, but there as a judge, I'm still going to have to go negative on that issue because I had a reasonable doubt because I just heard it generates a boatload of money, but I'm still questioning why didn't it get where it was supposed to go. I don't know, yeah. Canada, yeah, I guess that's pretty analogous. And the final thing is, I think you conceded. This is why I probably would have had, I don't say I vote very often, I probably would have had to vote negative. I think you conceded. I think you better watch out for this. This is very damning evidence, this IQ loss and this adolescent youth. I think you kind of conceded it, and it's like...
It's just like, I could not, I looked, believe me, but how the hell can you, write anything about how, it doesn't damage anything that said it didn't do that damage was from an opinion bullshit and I was like, okay, there's no way I can really get around that argument, and I knew that was gonna be one of her arguments.
Yeah, I know.
So I guess
I know, and you, Miriam, should have sort of recognized this is my killer, right? Because this is very troubling because we know that adolescents are going to get a hold of this, and it's when it's legalized, it's sort of normalizing it, and it makes it a commodification, and the big business gets at it. Makes it okay. That's the thing that troubles me the most is, if we could figure out a way to keep it out of the teenagers' mouths or hands or something. I don't know how to do that. That's why I'm just like troubled by this thing. I'm worried that it's going to be, really, we're going to have a generation of dumbos.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah. So anyway, okay, I think that's enough said. Let me see. Yeah. Pie in the sky jobs didn't don't forget your own bone. Oh yeah, that's enough. Okay. Thank you. This is a great debate. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was just music to my ears to see this one. So
Glad to
I'll
hear
put it up with your permission. I'll put this up if I can ever get it uploaded.
Yeah, you want me to email it to you?
Yeah, email me your case, and I'll put this up on the web, and then I'll get this video up somehow. Okay, so that's the end of this video, folks, and I want you to know that these two fine young UCLA students were signed these positions randomly, and they could easily have taken the other side, and especially you people in China. I have 19 followers in China on my channel.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do.
Really? That's cool.
I know, yeah. So you hang in there. We're looking at that prison now that you have all those, poor people in. And we're going to remember that. Okay. Goodbye for now. Bye.